Hello ladies and gentlemen, and others. It's myself, Jonathan, also known as the PC Genie. I'll get right to it. We're going to be having a look at, of course, as per the title, Dead Rising 3. It's an interesting game by Capcom, and if you don't know much about Capcom, they're quite famous or notorious for somewhat arcade-style games. I'm pretty sure they did a few actual arcade games as well. But yes, in terms of the setup, well, let's get to it.
I gotta get back to the others.
So, in terms of our main character, his name is Nick Ramos. Bit of a similar style to the previous games with Frank West and Chuck Green. He is, well, he is, suffice it to say, quite the survivor. Admittedly, normally I'm sat there looking at these people and thinking, so, you know what, there are, literally tens of thousands of zombies around. Okay, move your game. Convince me, why are they the 1 in 10,000? And not in this case. I mean, if we went from Fallout, special type of scale, this guy and the previous characters definitely takes our strength aspect quite literally up to 11 out of 10. It's ridiculous. Apart from the fact that he can throw benches like they're just made of cardboard, and same with mailboxes and all the rest. Well, I mean, let's have a little bit of a comparison here. So, this little clip I'll show here. You see, of course, myself trying to wield a sledgehammer, and insert surprise here. Yeah, I struggle. Because it's a 10-pound sledgehammer. And now, we switch over to Nick, and oh, what do you know? He's using it quite easily like it's a bat. Oh yes, very strong character.
Hello?
In terms of the character progression, I have to admit, there's a difference between Nick and the previous characters. I'll admit I don't know much about the first one, Frank West, because I never played the original Dead Rising, but I know that in Dead Rising 2, Chuck Green pretty much already starts as a sort of stoic, deep-voiced, badass type character, and the main sort of progression is more seeing him develop, relationships, and how he really loves his daughter Katie and will do anything for her, and trying to do things like fetch the Zombrex, which is an anti-zombie medication she has to take every 24 hours. So that's the type of area the story goes into in terms of the characters there. But with Nick, it's a completely different story, where he hasn't got any zombification, that he has to worry about. Instead, it's a scenario where he's sort of only just for the first time experiencing the zombie apocalypse, and he starts really sort of stumbling in his words and timid and shy, and it actually comes across in gameplay. Like if you encounter a large group, he'll be there going, oh no, focus Nick, focus, that sort of stuff. But as the story progresses on, he starts to gain confidence, sort of take the whole apocalypse scenario in his stride, and sort of making quips and things. And you see the same kind of thing coming across in the fact that he fancies another character called Annie. And, same kind of thing, he starts stumbling in his words and being quite shy, but then comes out of his shell gradually. And I think it's a nice touch for the story.
Damn it, come on!
In terms of gameplay activities, obviously there are the main story missions, which you have to do to progress and you gain this sort of experience and things like that. But there are also things like people that need immediate saving, so maybe someone stood on a car, help me, that kind of stuff. And also some survivors who are more sort of tucked away, but they're sort of quite idiotic, to be honest, usually. Usually they're not keen on surviving and they won't do anything. It'll be like, I don't know, oh no, I'm not going to, feed myself and kill the zombies and not die horribly until I get my favourite teddy bear from the luggage I left over at the opposite end of the map. So, admittedly, those can get a bit tedious sometimes, but certainly interesting novelty dialogues can come out of those. And there are also some rather interesting and humorous, slightly stereotypical psychopaths who are well, they speak for themselves. They're sort of like boss fights, but they're voluntary rather than mandatory as part of the main story. And you get the experience. I'll admit it's one of those weird things where the games are going to decide we're not going to call them that. You know, it's not life, it's your blood meter, or that's not your mana, that's your spirit essence stuff, yeah. In this game, it's not experience points, it's prestige points, or PP for short. So yes, you've got plenty of activities to have PP going everywhere.
Zombie outbreak? Seriously?
There are other weird novelty factors to the game as well. There are collectibles and sort of things to do, like well, there are tragic endings, which are, well, they speak for themselves, sort of people who were survivors and have died for various reasons, usually with some weird novelty message attached. Like, one example I'll give you is, there's one person who died who was trying to outlive the whole thing whilst on top of a pillar, and I guess they died of starvation or exposure or something. And then when you go over to them and you detect them, it says, getting high doesn't solve all your problems, that sort of novelty rubbish, but it's a bit of a gimmick. Besides that, you've also got your collectible Frank West trophies, which in universe don't make that much sense, because I'm pretty sure he was vilified as supposedly causing an outbreak, you know, this is the bad guy, everyone. But whatever, it's another novelty. With Nick being a mechanic background, he's able to create combination weapons, which admittedly have been a feature that are always around throughout the series right from the beginning. It's one of the main selling points of the game, where you can have ridiculous combinations where, I don't know, you've got some toy and you're going to mix it with some leaf blower, and then suddenly voila! Like one silly example, if you get a torch, you know, ordinary flashlight, and you mix it with some jewellery, suddenly lightsaber, or sorry, I mean light sword. Mustn't make that copyright definition there. Sure thing. But yeah, as I say, I mean, one of the things that's a new feature is that instead of just having a combination of basic weapons, you can also create combination vehicles. So, for example, you can mix a very large sort of, I think it was something like one of those steamrollers with a car or an SUV or something, and then it turns into the turret rig, an extremely tough vehicle with a gun on top that blasts the zombies away. So again, extra novelty factor. You can probably see a pattern emerging here. In terms of the zombies, you've got somewhat obviously got your standard types of variants, you know, different models of men and women. But you also do have, besides that, police and SWAT styled ones, who, well, the police ones are just as easy to kill, but they have firearms, and they occasionally, though haphazardly, sort of remember how to use them, so they kind of are able to fire in your general direction, but they quite rarely hit. But it's nice if you want to collect extra gear. And besides that, as you've got the more sort of SWAT style ones, they similarly, they have guns and they sort of fire in your general direction, but because they've got body armour on, they're a bit harder to kill. You've also got firemen, and they are tougher to kill and completely immune to anything based on fire, because, what do you know, they're in their fire-resistant equipment, which is an interesting scenario. It doesn't normally affect you, but if you've got something like a flamethrower type weapon or something else deliberately flame-based, you sort of, you know, puts a spanner in the works there, and you have to switch to some other means of killing them. Beyond that, you've also got prisoner types, who are more sort of big and burly, tough types. And apart from that, you've got your padded football variants, who, again, they're sort of tougher variants, but rather than being sort of brutish, slower versions of zombies, they actually charge at you and tackle you down, even though they're headbutting you instead of managing to bite you, because they still got their helmets on. Again, it's a bit of a novelty, but it spices things up a bit, and I think it's a bit more creative than your bog standard stuff like you'd see in Dead Island, you know, the exploding one, the big one, the one that vomits weird stuff at you or whatever. I think it's a bit more creative this time, so well done, Dead Rising. Now remember, kids, don't eat spoiled food, don't drink too much booze, and whatever you do, avoid that rubbish concoction randomizer. Why do I say this? I'm pretty sure one of the developers somewhere is some kind of emeta file or something, because every single game seems to be a bit of a puke fest. Seriously, I'm surprised this thing hasn't turned into some kind of meme or some of that rubbish. In fact, I'll probably show an example of how it could be used at the end of this video. At this rate, might as well have the main characters of the series renamed to Frank Wet Burp, Up Chuck Green, and Sick Ramos. Good grief. All in all, the fighting in a game is essentially, it's one of those, well again, it's that novelty theme again. Not going to expect much realism involved, but it's certainly very fun to play at the same time because you know it's completely over the top. It's one of those things where you're basically playing the superhero, except unlike Superman you can't fly. I have to say though, you have to give credit to whoever the voice actor was for Nick. I mean, let's just listen to some of this. You can really tell the enthusiasm as he's fighting.
Come on!
So, overall, I mean, I'd say that this is the sort of game where you want to just sort of kick back and relax and use the most stupendously ridiculous weapons to massacre tens of thousands of zombies rather than do anything too serious. This would definitely be the game for you, and all the prequels and sequels as well apply. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers!
And I'm Cool Kid, and I love all kids.